Wonderful. Claire, we are officially live, and
Lisa,
I am going to try. And before we continue, for those that haven't seen us live here for a while with the Entrepreneur Mindset Show, it's been a long break, but we have been in South Africa on the summer holidays between December and January. So what we decided to do was just restart this in the month of love and kickstart with an amazing woman. And I'm going to put her on the spot today, and I'm going to ask her, which is Claire Keet, to just tell us a little bit about herself. Because normally I talk about your bio and I introduce you, but I really think I'm not going to do it justice. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience.
No pressure. Hi, Anissa. Thank you so much for having me. And I love how you introduced February as the month of love. True story. Yeah, it's a very difficult thing, I think, to introduce myself, especially because the 1st of February marked a more formal transition career-wise into my first official foray as a venture builder. I say official because I can actually now use the title on LinkedIn, which is, a really great achievement. But the path that has led me to this point is very colorful and very varied in terms of startup. So yeah, I can dive in at any stage of the journey. The last week, I guess, has been my first 7 official days in the venture building space. Before that, I was creative directing through an agency called Jack, based out of Johannesburg. And before that was riding the startup roller coaster across a number of startups. So you guide me as to where to hop on the journey.
So before we get stuck into it, so I just want to welcome back everyone that is here with us today. Please feel free to engage. Those that are here with us live, I always love the interaction. Claire loves it too. So don't hesitate to post those comments as we're going along. If something's triggered, tell us about your entrepreneurial journey and how your mindset needed to be robust to stand the test of running that business, first and foremost. Hafiz Al-Haifa, hi Haifa, thank you for joining. So what we'll do in between every 10 minutes or so, Claire, we will acknowledge those that are giving us comments. And for those that are on the replay, please don't hesitate to also share your sentiments once you've watched it. So we're going to dive right in. And I like to start off with, let's start at the beginning. Why did you start going into entrepreneurship? What was that pull away from being in a formal, more corporate environment than where you are now?
So the joke of this story is that I've never actually been in a corporate context. I've never worked in corporate. I've had one truly formal job outside of the last 18 months or so. I studied a Bachelor of Journalism at Rhodes University. And that journalism degree equipped me with a specialization in communication design. So you're making beautiful things to get messages across to people to compel certain action and behavior and emotion and so forth. And after I graduated, I got my first formal job and I worked at a communication house and it was great. I loved my job, amazing colleagues. It was very creative. But I was 22 or whatever a young graduate's age is. And I needed to go and have an adventure. And so after 1 year, I decided to go and teach English in South Korea, along with half of the other graduates who I finished varsity with, and many other very interesting people. And I ended up living in Daejeon, South Korea for 4 years, which was not the plan. I had meant to go for a year and I just loved it. And what I loved about it was the amazing exposure to different cultures, the ability to travel. What I didn't love so much about it, unfortunately, was the teaching component, which was what I was spending a good portion of my day doing. But because we were only required to teach for 4 hours out of an 8-hour day. I had these 4 hours available to me every day. And I was like, I've got to fill my time with something productive that's really stimulating for me. And a dear friend of mine and I, he was living in Australia at the time. I was, of course, in South Korea. We started a design agency called Boris Henry. And we were really, I like to think, a bit ahead of our time in terms of remote working and making the internet work for us. We did design and branding and brand manifestos and various brand tools with Graham living in Australia, me in South Korea, and clients kind of all around the world. And it was quite small scale stuff. We were both balancing other jobs alongside Boris Henry. But that's what got me into entrepreneurship, and I guess is what solidified the idea that, hey, I can do the self-employment thing. I was doing it with the safety of a paycheck, obviously from the teaching. Yeah. And so that was a very soft entrance into what it meant to define a service offering, position that service offering in a way that would solve people's problems. So yeah, I cut my teeth in that way.
Gosh, that's, if I think about it, you probably were one of the pioneers of, like you said, not only remote working, but the gig economy, because you were kind of doing different gigs all at the same time. And you were there being of service, solving whatever, whether it was design problems or communication problems. I mean, little did you know that as your journey unfolded, that's really where it was going to bring you back home to it. Much later, though.
Totally. Yeah, and I must say, two things have really stayed from that very initial entrance into entrepreneurship. The first is that the world is a very big place, and we can participate in lots of different economies and geographies, and with loads of different people. Geography is no longer a barrier, and it hasn't been for me for a very long time. I know that COVID obviously accelerated that perspective for many other people, but yeah, I've long since held the belief that geography, whatever, we can overcome the boundaries of geography. And then the other one is the power of design to really compel behavior, to compel perspectives, to compel transaction. So those two things are two pillars that I have definitely brought forward with me in my career, I guess, from the post-teaching and post-design agency phase.
Before we come back to the present, I'm still pretty much intrigued. Thank you, Dr. Maria, for joining us from Instagram as well. I will look at the LinkedIn comments shortly. So Dr. Maria is actually, I think, in England. And Heifer, can you tell us where you are now? Because you were in South Africa for a while, and then you moved around thereafter. Eloise, lovely for having you join us. I coach women to believe in themselves. I love that. Love that. Lovely having you here, Eloise. And maybe we could have you as one of our guests not too long from now. So reach out. Love to hear your story. So I want to stay in that period of time, because I mean, when you were outside of your home, right? You were in a foreign country. You didn't like much about the teaching, but you were delving into this world of entrepreneurship. What exactly kept you grounded, besides now doing the additional gigs? Because entrepreneurship, as we call it, is all about mindset. What made you maintain that level of composure? Mind I say, at what age, if I may reveal that?
I think it would have been kind of 22, 23, 24, 25, the early 20s, early to mid 20s. Anissa, I think what really grounded those early forays into entrepreneurship was just sheer excitement and curiosity. I think it was also new and also fresh, and it felt like such a freeing and liberating space to be playing in. It was reminiscent of some of the open creative briefs that I experienced when I was studying. There were no rules, and with that came obviously pressure, and it's all on you. There's no one else to pass the buck to. But I think what has always drawn me to anything entrepreneurial is the absolute creative freedom. I say creative freedom, of course, you are immensely constrained by the commercial structures that govern the success of a venture. But yeah, for me, I've always been drawn to, and the starting point, the grounding position for me has always been, I just love doing this stuff. It's so exciting to me. It always has been, and I really hope it always is. So that's what, yeah, that's, I guess, the pillar of what got me in and hooked.
So the one thing I'm getting from that is that there was purpose and intentionality from the start. There was very clear value set. So you were clear on what your values were and what were congruent with those values and what would be incongruent. And so you also spoke about curiosity. Now, that piques my interest. So at the early stages, in that very early years of delving into this realm, I mean, curiosity, what's the saying? Curiosity kills the cat.
Yeah.
But curiosity is such a vital skill that is required in the new age that we're living in, right? Because if we're not curious, what we're saying is we're not willing to try and learn and try again. So in those periods of time that you were curious at this very early time in your career, what happened in those times when it didn't work out well?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the more, I was going to use the word catastrophic, but I think that might be a little bit heavy-handed. I think that the ventures that I've been involved in where there's been a more significant commercial failure, as it were, that's where the major learnings kind of came in. Boris Henry, the design agency, it didn't have to generate significant revenue because there was the safety net of paychecks for both myself and my partner at the time, Graham. The real learnings and the real hard lessons, I think, came a little bit later in the process. Yeah, I can definitely get into some of those. And funnily enough, some of them link to a lack of curiosity or a bias towards certain assumptions. I know this is a classic startup mistake, which likely every founder has fallen into the trap of at least once.
I would love for you to expand on that because, I mean, the purpose of why we host these segments is really to, one, inspire other entrepreneurs to stay the course, and two, to learn and grow from others' experiences. So if you wouldn't mind just delving into a bit more depth around, particularly staying away from being curious, because that's interesting. So it's a time that you were very curious, but there were times it was like, hold on, I'm going to steer away. Is that fear of failure? Was that because of that?
Totally. I think that at the heart of any venture build, any startup, anything that is supposed to have some commercial success, there needs to be initial curiosity, observations of the world around us, to spot gaps, to start pulling golden threads together, to observe where perhaps competitors are not doing the job properly, or just to see the world around us and to spot opportunities to do things better. And then there's a really exciting phase of coming up with what we assume is a viable solution to whatever problem we've identified or gap we've spotted. So that's where curiosity needs to be really at top volume. And I think that's where things get really challenging, because in coming up with a solution for an opportunity or problem that you've spotted within the market, it's very easy to become attached to the solution that you develop. So it's such a massive hole that is easy to fall, that can trip you up so easily, because there's, I suppose, an element of the ego that becomes involved. I've got the solution and I've spent so much time and energy and I've been burning the midnight oil and maybe I've burnt myself out and I'm working 2 jobs and I've come up with this and I've put this product in front of people. And the danger comes in when curiosity stops then, because really you are the custodian for a very short period of time of the solution. And then it should go into market and be put in front of people, and their contributions then become the major driver for the development or progression of that solution or product, service, whatever it might be. So I've definitely been caught in a situation where, perhaps out of fear, definitely out of a little bit of attachment to a certain idea, I have not put these things out into the world with enough openness to say, it's kind of come through me, but now the contributions of the people who I think this thing will solve problems for are way more important than my own assumptions. So I was involved in an app design, and we chatted a lot to a lot of people and investors about this concept, and everyone who heard it was like, yes, that's the solution. Turns out that's a very different thing from putting the app in front of people and asking them to engage with it. Those are 2 fundamentally different things. And because I didn't do the second part early enough, we built an app that is trying to solve a really important problem but isn't doing it effectively. So the point I'm trying to make is that curiosity should be a key driver of any venture, and for a very brief period of time, obviously guided by a vision to have a certain amount of impact in a certain area. For a brief amount of time, that idea sits with you and you've got to birth it. And then the feedback on the contributions of others is what then morphs and refines and molds that idea into a true solution. Yeah, so I've been tripped up, but I'm trying very hard. I should probably have curiosity tattooed on my forearm. That's how important it is.
Yeah, because, you've raised a few pertinent points as well. Aisha, thank you for joining us. So the thing that I picked up on is that you're solving problems, right? And when we're solving problems, we're solving it for a purpose, to make impact for that particular population or target market or whoever you're serving within that product or service offering. And I do find, Zaida, thanks for joining. I do find as well that we solve, and I was chatting yesterday to the WCED's e-learning department, and we were talking around projects that start, and, they start with great vigor and excitement and energy, and they, the curiosity is high, it's like, let's see where this goes. And then it doesn't even go to execution. So obviously that's a different entity. They're not an entrepreneur, but they could be entrepreneurial in their own right, the WCED's e-learning division, because they are trying to serve a particular segment and grow that and scale it as well, just as well as entrepreneurs do. But what I find so apt in so many places, whether you're a small, medium enterprise or a large corporate, is that they start and they want to take action, and they forget the most important stakeholders, as you have mentioned, those that they are serving, and they forget to design, wait for it, from an empathetic standpoint.
Exactly.
Where does empathy play a role in, and I want to get to not empathy for your customers. I'm talking about self-empathy in the entrepreneurial journey, because that often takes a backseat. So you've mentioned you have to write curiosity on your arm somewhere. So you've got some battle scars of that. And so there's a bit of judgment. We judge ourselves and we almost feel like, why the hell didn't I do this differently?
For sure.
So talk to me about empathy. How do you bring in empathy into this journey of your world, whether it's venture building or entrepreneurship?
I think empathy, for me, empathy and curiosity start to feel like a very similar sort of word. It's the way that you should be as an entrepreneur or as a person building a solution for other people. So whether we're calling it venture building or startup or SME or business ownership, it doesn't really matter. You're trying to put a solution in front of someone and hope that they buy it. I mean, in blunt terms. And without truly understanding that person and exercising a deep empathy towards what might truly solve their problems, you are doomed from the onset. And I think when it comes to personal empathy, I must say I've become a lot gentler with myself in terms of, I mean, when you move into a startup environment and you come out guns blazing, there are a few solid facts that you have to become very comfortable with. One is that 9 out of 10 startups fail. So you immediately need to become friends with the risk of what it is that you're up to. And I think that accepting that, making peace with that, it's really helped me to be a little bit more gentle with myself when it comes to entities that have not worked out from a commercial perspective. To kind of realize, hey, I'm at least getting out there and giving it a shot. I think self-encouragement is really important. I'm doing more than the person who's not trying at all. Yes, I have ideas, and yes, I try different things, and sure, some of them don't work and others of them work and others take on a whole different form within 6 months. But at least I'm out there trying. And I think especially if one's able to ground one's activities in a deep kindness, empathy, awareness, curiosity about other people, if you are always guided by that value, then it's hard to be yuck to yourself if you know you've been really trying. And yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out.
I love everything that you just said there. I just want to acknowledge Aisha Ali saying such amazing insights. Curiosity is the key. And what I loved what you said is I'm going to be friends with something around the lines of being friends with if you're making a mistake, in other words. So not judging yourself. And as my coach trainer, Dr. Colleen, always says, fail is for all I learn. Right? So there's never really a fail, because every single time, even in your earlier years, those learnings and lessons has actually given you such deep, great knowledge, power, and insight that you are able to take it along with you. What I want to ask you though now is let's come back to the present moment where you are now. And I just want to, you didn't do your bio justice. So I just want to share for context for the audience so that at least when we're delving into this part of the segment, they get to understand it. So we wrote a post saying a different way to start up, right? And Claire will share some reason around that statement. What is a different way to start up? Moving into venture building for someone else from co-founding startups, and she's going to expand on that a bit more. But just a little bit more for those that might have just joined us now. When Claire studied journalism at Rhodes, her favorite project had the brief design a 120-page magazine. That was it. Her first taste of the complete freedom that comes with defining and solving a problem. She's been chasing this high in the startup world ever since. As a multidisciplinary founder and design thinker, Claire has co-founded startups across legaltech, deathtech, and femtech. And interestingly enough, the word comes up again, armed with curiosity and drawing on her experiences on the startup rollercoaster. She recently transitioned to the world of venture building, partnering with ambitious people to try, test, iterate, build with new ideas. I want to now delve into, so if there are these big problems we're trying to solve in the world, what are those pain points that you can share with the audience that you had to deal with in your earlier years and even now stepping into this new realm?
Wow, I mean, there are a lot of pain points all the time. I mean, I think one of the really big ones in a startup, or, you know, when you're given that very open brief, and it might be a brief you're giving to yourself. For example, I'm going to co-found startup X that's going to solve problem Y, or whether it's an open brief, you're part of an innovation team and you've got to build a new venture. It's very daunting, but it's also an extremely, extremely liberating and freeing space to be in. So I think one of the things is to try and keep a cool head. It will feel overwhelming. There's just no getting away from that. You will have to drive a ship that feels a bit directionless, that, I mean, frankly, feels like it isn't even floating yet. So yeah, I think it's again that awareness of coming into your new venture, your new build, your new startup, having already made peace with a lot of things, a lot of the pain points that you're going to experience. You will be rejected more often than you'll be said yes to. People will criticize your product, which, I mean, is really good. That's very, very important stuff. Bad feedback, good feedback. It hasn't got a label. It's actually gold for the startup. You will feel overwhelmed. You will not know what to do with your day. Some days will be cripplingly anxiety filled. Others you'll just be in flow. So I think being aware of the journey that you're about to embark on is half the battle won, knowing that it will be very, very hard, and that the pain points there will be a lot of them. I think that really helps me anyway when I start a new thing.
Well, that's an extremely healthy mindset, right? But there's also what you mentioned earlier on, attachment. And attachment is the root cause to suffering, right? So it causes a lot of suffering in the end. Yeah. I want to acknowledge Louise's beautiful comments to you. Just love the insight. Being patient and kind with oneself is pivotal to succeed. And absolutely. I love your tenacity, Claire, she says.
Thank you.
So thanks for those beautiful comments, Eloise. Let's then delve into, yes, there's those points of pain. You want to solve these big, audacious problems in the world, and you believe you can make this happen. You know, you've strong, robust values, and it's aligned with those values, and your purpose is very clear. So the intent and your mission is very, very defined. Let's think about the loneliness of entrepreneurship, right? And the support structures. So for those that don't know how Claire and I cross paths, I am employed with Seaber Ignition Academy, which runs a level up program, which is what we refer to as an inspirator program for entrepreneurs, where we design and co-create rather a customized program for that entrepreneur based on where they are in their journey. And I got the pleasure of meeting Claire with her business partner, Sanel, at the time. And I think that was the deathtech realm that you were working in. And I was just amazed by Claire's relentless drive and energy to actually just persevere amidst the rejections and the no's. But let's come back to the support. What do you want to share around support that's out there for entrepreneurs? Because surely when we think we have to do this all by ourselves, it's an untruth. Let's journey there for a moment.
Yeah, I think that's another coming into the journey as you packing your startup backpack. You know, being aware that isolation is not a good thing in the startup venture build kind of space, that you are stronger with other people. Collaboration is very, very powerful and very important. And understanding that there will be very dark days where it's extremely helpful to be able to chat to someone and say, listen, it is so horrible. No one has said yes for a very long time and things feel really hopeless. I think that I mean, I feel very fortunate because I have a number of friends and have built a network of founders and business owners. So when we have supper together, conversation will often turn to, hey, I'm really struggling with this or with that. I think that there is a certain openness in the startup space. Of course, there's hardcore competition as well, but I do believe that there's a certain openness born out of the sheer, you get kicked and then you get knocked down while you're still down, that people have a certain openness to helping out. They've been down in the trenches and they might be a little bit more ahead in the success trajectory, on the success trajectory that you are. And what I have found is that people in the startup venture space are quite open to sharing a hard-won lesson, making an introduction, having a chat, having a coffee, meeting for a coffee, a commiseration, a success, clinking of glasses. I have found, in my experience, that there is an openness. You just have to reach out. And I mean, luckily, LinkedIn is such a wonderful place for those types of connections. And then, Anissa, to your earlier point, finding programs. I've been through an accelerator with Sunil for our legal tech startup, Pop Law. And it was just so great to, that was a more structured kind of formulaic program compared to the Inspirator, which obviously Level Up offers. And there again, you're in community with people who are also down in the trenches, who also don't really know what they're doing, who have to wake up and, fire up the confidence even when it's hard. So there are lots of these communities and groups. I think there are also a lot of networking events, certainly here in Cape Town, South Africa, where you might be able to intercept with people in a similar boat to you. But I would say that it can be a very lonely journey. It can be very isolating, and you've got to work quite hard at making sure you've got people in your court who you can have a laugh with, have a cry with, who are going to jump for joy when you jump for joy. Funnily enough, I was just remembering, I went on a walk with a friend of mine, and I had told her about this accelerator, Sunil, and I had applied for, and we desperately wanted to get on. And after the walk, I checked my phone, and the acceptance email was there, and I started jumping up and down and screaming. And she took photos of me. And it was so special to be able to share a triumph, a rare triumph of a dear friend who was able to walk the journey with me. So find people who care, and I mean, friends are great for that, but there's also a big world of startup people out there as well. That would be my advice.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to just expand on that. I mean, given that RCS, is the main sponsor of the Level Up program, if I think about RCS being a corporate that is passionate, right, about enterprise supply development for entrepreneurs, there's the corporate itself, and then there's other ecosystems attached to the corporate. Then there is people like SIBA, Ignition Academy, who I love to work alongside because we're all passionately inspired individuals within this realm of entrepreneurship. And so what about ecosystems, and what type of ecosystems would you say are good ones to connect with? Is it like for like within your industry, or do you diversify, and just from your own experience, Claire, because sometimes we want to go to what is similar and feels comfortable, but does diversity help breed sort of that loneliness on this journey?
Yes, I think diversity is very relevant. I think that there are some universal or universally binding experiences that one will go through on a startup journey. And, the basics of commerce are what they are: supply, demand. And if you can solve a certain problem, then you're running a business. I think there's certain building blocks that, underpin all verticals and all sectors and all industries. So I don't necessarily think that it's certainly it hasn't been necessary for me to stay within the verticals that I've worked in, also because they've been so varied. There's been merchanting, there's been legal, death, femtech. There's just been so much that I think had I only focused on a very niche group, you know, for example, I only want to talk to or engage with founders who, you know, are also working in legal tech or also working in, you know, whatever particular sector, I think that could be quite limiting, because it doesn't matter what startup someone is working in. They're up against many of the same sort of issues that you are. Sure, it might not be like for like. But again, I think that comes back to the curiosity value of accepting or acknowledging that you can learn something from everyone. You know, it doesn't matter which vertical or sector they're working in.
So, which leads me to the next question that's popped up based as you were talking. I'm thinking about collaboration and sort of joint ventures with other entrepreneurs. Has that worked in your experience, or is that something you would say to be more discerning around? And if it's worked, where has it worked? And if it hasn't worked, why has it not worked? Oh gosh, that was too many questions at one there. But you get the gist.
I've been in a number of business partnerships with a few different people. It's a really serious relationship to enter into. It has major legal considerations, and the last handful of partnerships I've been in have been with the same person. So my co-founder Sanel and I co-founded a legal tech startup together and also a deathtech startup. And a huge benefit of working with a lawyer is that the lawyer knows how to look forward to, it's like an anti-nuptial contract, right? You don't want to be thinking about the what ifs, about what goes wrong. But once you have thought about that, what happens to the IP if this doesn't work? What happens to, you know, can we work in the same industry, you know, after this thing goes belly up? Understanding how you're going to navigate, frankly, the inevitable demise of your venture. I'm saying that again with the context of, you know, 9 out of 10 startups fail. Getting the groundwork for a partnership from a legal perspective so that you're on the same page while things are really exciting and good and happy in honeymoon phase, I think that's very important. That's definitely been a major point of comfort for me in terms of the last handful of startups. Very recently, another person who I work with, Sabir Banubai of Jack Studios, and I are doing a venture build together. I'm reporting to her as CEO, and we're building a new enterprise together over a period of 6 months. So we have just gone through the process of formalizing a partnership. I think partnerships are very powerful. It's, like I said, extremely scary and lonely to hop onto the startup or the venture train alone. And yeah, people have amazing things to offer if you are open to it and if you're able to detach a bit from, you know, preconceptions and egos and things. So yeah, successful partnerships, there've been some not such successful ones, but yeah, I would say really, I can't emphasize the significance of the legal side of things.
So legal for me is one aspect, and it's the more obvious one, but ends up being forgotten actually for most part. I mean, I've seen it in many of the entrepreneurial cohorts that we've worked with, is that the excitement and energy is like it's all bliss and they forget. But there's also something else which I've discovered, is that if it's not values aligned right at the start, it's not the magic recipe then for a partnership. So what exactly would you say, other than legal and values, makes for a good recipe for success for a partnership or collaboration?
Yeah, I think being really honest about your weak points and knowing yourself enough to be able to put forward your success or your strengths. I think it's really powerful when two people can say, hey, I'm not great at that. Could you please step up there? The risk, of course, is that the other person is also not great at it, in which case you find alternative resources. I think having honest and frank conversations around strengths and weaknesses is great, because then you also know how to collaborate effectively with one another. You know where the push and the pull is. And sometimes you match with strengths, and that can be a very exciting, stimulating environment to be in. I think aligning on the more like boring side of startups, for example, hey, how do you like to work? Do you like deep focus time? Or do you prefer to be in like a buzzy co-working space where you and I are like riffing off each other? I think having conversations like that earlier helps to avoid friction that might come along later. Do you like being contacted on WhatsApp? What are the rules of engagement? Things like that can easily build to resentment. I think a mental health thing is figuring out how you're going to deal with conflict, because that will be inevitable. It will come up and it needs to be managed. You need to figure out the ways in which, I guess it's like, entering a romantic relationship in many respects. You've got to know yourself. Yeah, definitely, especially in Nisa, as you say, once the honeymoon period has worn off and the glow of is now fading, that's when...
And all those rejections are coming in, and it's like the pressure is mounting. So I love how you phrase it. It's around the rules of engagement, because that's often the unsaid stuff that simmers and then overflows, and then that can very much cause a break in that partnership or that relationship. And if it's meaningfully connected relationships, that's what will amplify transformation for both yourselves individually in that partnership, as well as the startup.
Exactly.
Now that we have 18 minutes left, can you believe we've only got 18 minutes remaining? I really want to get into this exciting new journey that you're embarking on. What's sitting in your space right now, and how are you feeling? And is the transition going to be very different for you? And please speak to us about that.
Sure, great questions. Funnily enough, they are not dissimilar to the questions that Sabir, the woman who I mentioned earlier, who I'm doing this venture build with, asked just the other day.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, quite interesting. She was asking how the transition is. So just for a bit of extra context, I worked for her agency for, 18 months or so as a creative director. And literally on the 1st of February, embarked on this venture build. And I said to her, it feels very familiar. It feels like I've strapped back into the roller coaster and I'm going. The difference this time, though, is that I'm doing the venture build and the startup, all of that deep exploration, the experimentation, the hypotheses defining, the try, see what sticks, adapt or die kind of stuff. I'm doing that within the safety of business scaffolding that Sabir is providing. So this is a venture that is, I guess, in some ways being incubated or housed within her existing agency. But the brief is the kind of brief that I like, which is build this thing. Let's collaborate and partner very deeply together. Let's draw on each other's deepest strengths, but go forth. This is your thing. Lead it, take it forward, and I'll provide more of the scaffolding, which, of course, in startup is you've got to build yourself and the startup. Yeah, it feels like a really exciting space for me. It feels like a safe space. It doesn't feel like I've jumped out of a plane without a parachute. I've jumped out of a plane with a parachute. So that's nice. That's a nice difference. Whereas with preceding startups, self-funding has always been the biggest the biggest headache, the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Well, the product first, but then, putting a roof over your head, it's tough. It's really tough. So this is a safer way of still getting to startup, which is great.
So for those that have been with us and now you're getting the picture of, whilst it's not a startup and it's venture building, it's still a new gig, a new venture, for lack of a better word here, for Claire. And what I'm hearing you say is that what will make the recipe for success here is that there's a level of autonomy, there's empowerment, there's trust, and there's resources. And so that all in and of itself makes this transition a little bit easier. While it's familiar, there's also a little bit unfamiliarness with it. But the unfamiliarness has been taken care of, knowing that you have all these resources at your disposal.
Absolutely. And it's also coming back to that partnership and collaborative factor as well. I know that at any given point, Sabir is there as the CEO of this enterprise to bounce things off to, so I already know I'm not going into this alone, which is a wonderful thing. And I think it just, again, highlights how important programs like Level Up are, like these various accelerators, inspirators, incubators, because there is often enormous scaffolding that is provided, some safety, be it funding, be it, just someone to phone and say things are really hard, be it educational resources, events, networking. So to that end, Level Up has been a real joy.
So Claire, tell me, for those that you and I understand, what's the difference between venture build, accelerator, inspirator? Just from your language, can you share what the key differences are in these different entities?
I'm not exactly sure, but what I understand of an accelerator is that it's a program often associated with some funding that startups are usually pitched to join. And if they're accepted onto them, it's whatever particular duration of set courses and programs and curriculum and resources, be it, I don't know, points with, Squarespace, or maybe it's exposure to certain thought leaders and funding. An inspirator, so I heard that for the first time when we joined Level Up, which is obviously where you and I first met. And what I really like about that, in contrast to a more traditional accelerator, is inspirator kind of meets the entrepreneurs where they are. And again, from a position of empathy and curiosity, says to the entrepreneur more, hey, what do you guys need? We're here to back you. So it's almost like the entrepreneur guides with the support, versus in a traditional accelerator, the accelerator guides and the entrepreneur kind of follows. That's, I guess, in my mind, how I think about it. And then with startup and venture, I mean, Anissa, I don't even know if I'm using the right words. Someone said to me, oh, they call a venture builder a venture partner. And I'm just like, tomato. As I understand it, certainly the way that it makes sense to me is that, co-founding a startup, you're very much doing it of your own volition within, usually the sniff of an oil rag, but self-funded until such a time where you can get backing. Whereas building a venture build, perhaps you're part of an innovation team, you are doing exactly that, but within the structure of an existing entity, be it a big corporate, or in the case of the business I'm working at, a smaller enterprise.
Yeah, so you're not really competing with those heavy pitches when you're trying to get funding, or you're trying to get onto a program, as an example. You really have almost carte blanche to run. Like we said, you've got full autonomy to be able to run with things and the full backing.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about problem solving and your other passion and hat that you wear as a design thinker. And we spoke about all of these concepts, right? When we design with empathy. We're curious. We want to learn. We want to fail. What's that saying? Fail fast forward or fail forward fast?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something to that effect. I mean, there's many permutations to it, but I think it's fail fast forward so that you can learn and iterate, right? How does design thinking, how has that served you in being one, a founder, and how might it better serve you in the venture build landscape?
It has been invaluable to me in my co-founding career because it has allowed me to, with my various partners and co-founders, get to market very, very quickly. We haven't had to pay for things like really good branding, and we've been able to put forward a product or a service or, really MVP type stuff, but that looks really good. And I think in many respects that has opened up conversations and exposure and opportunities that we might not have had if we didn't look as sexy or as professional or as established, even though we weren't. Let me be very clear about that. I think that showing that you take yourself seriously, that you take your ideas seriously, and that using design to communicate that has been very important from a startup perspective. And then, many of those same things apply in venture building, being able to very quickly put together an excellent presentation or send through. I've been doing qualitative interviews today, just going back to empathy and curiosity.
I was going to get to that as well. Yes. So thank you. Please go there.
Yeah. And after these calls, I was able to send through a beautiful Uber Eats voucher. You're asking people to give up their most important resource, time, to talk to you.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to be given a lunch voucher. So instead of just a boring old Uber Eats voucher, it's a beautifully designed thing in the brand, and it just conveys a little bit more of the narrative, of the values of the story.
But so are you talking about the gift as when you pass on that gift, or are you talking about the process of doing these qualitative interviews and the salience behind that before going to market? Because I think my understanding, and having also done a course on design thinking, I'm also very passionate about it, because when we design with the key stakeholder that we're designing for in mind, right? So these interviews that you are doing is paramount to the successful go live or implementation.
Exactly. I mean, it comes back to what we were chatting about earlier, where for a very brief period of time, the idea for something is sitting in your hands, and you think a solution, and then you put it out into the world, and how it is received or not received by people, that should be informing your design process, so that you are building for, designing for, design thinking for a solution that is effective, is meaningful, actually solves the problem. And you cannot do that in isolation, as you know.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, so the typical thing that most people do is like, I've got this idea, let me take it to market. And so would you then say and attest that that's partly the reason why 90% of what was that stat? 90% of entrepreneurs.
90. I mean, I should fact check that, but it's extremely high, the percentage of startups that do fail. Yeah, I think it's a fine balance between getting to market very rapidly, putting something out that's, a minimum viable product that can immediately start testing your most risky assumptions before you've built a R1 million app, or before you've, got an import of X metric tons of whatever from wherever. So I think it's a balance of putting stuff out there testing, iterating, and being very confident in the fact that you probably won't be done for a very long time. I think the minute you go to market with what you think is a complete, finished, perfect product, that's dangerous territory.
So let's come back in the last 5 minutes around mindset. You know, often when I coach the entrepreneurial cohorts, some come in like guns blazing. I'm here because I want to grow my business and it's all about the business. And they tend to forget about self-care, and they tend to forget about themselves in a holistic manner. And often what often happens is that there's burnout, there is anxiety, there's stress. How have you managed to contain being more holistic versus I'm only one track minded? I'm going in and I'm building this product and I want to launch it, and that's more important.
Elisa, I mean, the truth of the matter is I haven't got that balance perfect. I've definitely got it much more right. I had burnout halfway through 2022. And, you know, classic story, had to have some medical leave, you know, had to take the medicine, see the therapist. I think that's par for the course when your adrenals are going up and down for such a long period of time. It's not a healthy place to be. But yeah, I think what's really, really helped me is coming back to the fact that work is not everything. It's hard for me because I love what I do. Like, I do it for fun. I love my job, but it can't be everything because I've seen what that feels like, and it's not a nice thing. So yeah, I'm very strict about taking leave. I'm very strict about work hours. I don't work past 5 ever. I start working at a normal hour. I actually work a 4-day work week, so I can be very, very focused in the 4 days and then have 3 days to just do the human things, see the friends, go to the movies, be active. So yeah, I've still craft out space for intense 4 days and then rest. Yeah.
That's some really sound advice. I mean, like across many of the cohorts, often you think that the funding would be an issue. It's resources that is a problem. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty of what actually is, it's like that iceberg. What they don't show the world, what's beneath the surface, is the struggle, the disproportionate amount of time spent, the lack of actually, like I've mentioned earlier on, self-care, the lack of even speaking to somebody, whether it's a mentor for support, whether it's a coach. Those are vital things that we take for granted. I think that that's also another benefit on most of the programs. I know on all of the different cohorts, you do get assigned either a mentor to support you in some of the skill sets that you're not equipped in, as you've alluded to earlier on. If both partners don't have it, you've got to get it outsourced. What other vital lessons have you learned on your journey that you'd like to impart and leave the audience with?
Wow, that's a fairly pressurized question. We hope to get it right, or at least say something partially wise.
There's no right or wrong here. We want authenticity, and we want to provoke and evoke, bringing this real truth to the forefront. You know, so whatever it comes to mind, just share.
I think a really big lesson is know when to walk away. I think that's been very, very important to me in all of my pursuits, entrepreneurial pursuits, is to know when to walk away and then to have deep peace around that decision. So nothing I've ever left, I've never looked back at again and gone, oh, I should have, I could have. It's gone now. Let's move, look forward. Obviously, you take a lot of lessons, but I think, making peace with knowing when to stop is as important as knowing when to dig deep and fuss bait and go really hard. Yeah, that's the first thing that came to mind.
That's really sage guidance there. Thank you, Claire. Thank you for those that joined us today. I want to just acknowledge Claire for her very open sharing and great wisdom that was shared here today. Where can people reach you, Claire? Is that something that you're open to? If people want to connect with you, where can they?
Yeah, definitely. I'm on LinkedIn. That would be the best place. Claire Keet.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there are many Claire Keets, but just look for my profile picture. There's a smile and red lipstick. Add me, and I'm always very, very open to chatting.
And I'm going to conclude on that note. And so for Eloise, thank you for your comments again. And yes, let's get in touch after this. And anyone else, we are going to be hosting these segments twice a week now, on a Monday and a Wednesday, 3:30 to 4:30 South African time. I think that's for Eastern time. That would be 8:30 in the morning for our audience abroad. Pleasure, Eloise. Eloise says, thanks, Anissa and Claire. Has given us an incredible guidance. Many thanks. Thank you too. And so for those that do want to participate in this forum, it is your forum. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and we most certainly can schedule it in for either Monday or Wednesday. Claire, I'm going to end our live, but please do stay on for us just to have a little bit of a debrief, as I always do with most of my guests. Thank you again for sharing such profound insight with us.
Thank you.
And I wish you well.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.